My sister Lydia made sure everyone at her wedding knew I was the pathetic single one. She seated me at the reject table, introduced me as still looking for someone, and even had her bridesmaids whisper about my sad love life. But when a mysterious stranger whispered, "Act like you're with me," what happened next turned her perfect day into my perfect revenge. The wedding hall sparkled with golden lights and crystal chandeliers. But all I could focus on was the table number in my hand, table 12. The singles table. The reject table. The place where Lydia had strategically placed me to make sure everyone knew her older sister was still alone. I'm Hannah. And I should probably start by explaining how I ended up as the family disappointment at my own sister's fairy tale wedding. Lydia and I had never been close, but the competition between us had reached toxic levels over the past year. Ever since she got engaged to Richard, a successful investment banker from a wealthy family, she'd made it her personal mission to remind me that I was 32 and still single. "Maybe you should try dating apps again," she'd say with fake concern during family dinners at our parents' house. "I mean, you can't be picky forever. Time is running out, Hannah." Our mother, Diane, would nod sympathetically while our father, Adam, would change the subject awkwardly, but Lydia never let it go. She seemed to take genuine pleasure in my romantic failures, as if my single status somehow validated her own happiness. The morning of her wedding, she called me with what she claimed was sisterly advice. "Hannah, honey, I know today might be hard for you," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, seeing everyone so happy and in love. "Just try not to look too miserable in the photos, okay? And please don't spend the whole night talking to the bartender like you did at Cousin Joanne's wedding." That should have been my first warning about what was coming. When I arrived at the Grandview Manor reception hall, wearing a beautiful navy dress I'd spent weeks picking out, Lydia's maid of honor, Marian, approached me with a clipboard and that particular smile people use when they're about to deliver bad news. "Oh, Hannah, let me show you to your table," she said with the same fake sweetness Lydia specialized in. Table 12 was tucked in the back corner, near the kitchen doors where the catering staff bustled in and out with trays of food. The others seated there were Lydia's single co-workers who barely acknowledged my existence and our elderly great-aunt Janet who spent the evening complaining about the music volume and asking if I'd considered lowering my standards. But the real humiliation came during the family introductions. The reception was in full swing when Lydia decided to parade me around like a cautionary tale. She grabbed my arm and pulled me toward a group of Richard's relatives, sophisticated-looking people who clearly came from money. "And this is my sister Hannah," Lydia announced, her arm around Richard's shoulder like she was claiming territory. "She's our little career woman, still focusing on work instead of finding someone special." The group smiled politely while I stood there, feeling heat creep up my neck. Mrs. Wellington, Richard's aunt, looked me up and down with obvious pity. "Oh dear, don't worry," she said, patting my arm with a manicured hand. "There's someone for everyone. Have you tried church groups? My nephew William met his wife at a prayer circle." Lydia laughed. Not a kind laugh, but the laugh of someone enjoying another person's discomfort. "Hannah's very independent, aren't you, sis?" The way she said independent made it sound like a disease. "I just haven't found the right person yet," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well, you can't wait forever," Richard's mother Margaret chimed in. "My daughter waited too long and now she's 45 with fertility issues. Don't make the same mistake." For the next hour, I endured a parade of Lydia's friends and Richard's family members offering unsolicited dating advice. Each conversation felt orchestrated, like Lydia had briefed them on exactly how to make me feel small. Joseph, Richard's business partner, suggested I try lowering my expectations. Christopher, a family friend, shared the story of his spinster aunt who finally found love at 50 with a widower who had 6 children. Even the photographer seemed to be in on it. When it came time for family photos, he kept asking if I had a +1 and looked genuinely confused when I said no. The breaking point came during the bouquet toss. All the single ladies to the dance floor, the DJ announced with enthusiasm that felt like mockery. I tried to hide behind a marble pillar, but Marian spotted me and grabbed my arm. "Come on, Hannah. This could be your lucky day." I found myself pushed into a circle of 20-something women who giggled and squealed as Lydia prepared to throw her bouquet. These were Richard's younger cousins, fresh out of college with their whole lives ahead of them. Standing among them, I felt ancient and desperate. Lydia looked directly at me, smirked, and deliberately threw the bouquet in the opposite direction. A 24-year-old named Chloe caught it while the crowd cheered. Lydia hugged her and announced loud enough for everyone to hear, "Looks like Hannah will have to wait a little longer." The laughter that followed felt like glass scraping against my skin. I saw people looking at me with that mixture of pity and relief that comes from witnessing someone else's humiliation. I retreated to my table, fighting back tears of rage and embarrassment. This was supposed to be a celebration of love, but Lydia had turned it into a public execution of my self-esteem. That's when I seriously considered leaving, just disappearing before anyone noticed I'd gone. Before I gave Lydia the satisfaction of seeing me cry, I was gathering my purse when a deep voice spoke quietly behind me, "Act like you're with me." I turned around, startled, to see a man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit. He was tall, probably 6 feet 2 inches, with dark hair and the kind of confident presence that made people notice him across a room. His eyes were kind but determined, and there was something magnetic about the way he carried himself. "Excuse me," I whispered back. "Your sister just spent 10 minutes telling my business associate about how worried she is about you being alone," he said, sliding into the chair next to me with fluid grace. "I'm guessing you didn't ask her to share your personal life with strangers." He was right. I could see Lydia across the room, gesturing in my direction while talking to a group of Richard's colleagues, probably explaining how sad it was that I couldn't find anyone to love me. "You don't mind, do you?" he asked, though his tone suggested he was already committed to whatever plan he had in mind. I shook my head, too surprised to speak. For the first time all evening, I didn't feel invisible. "I'm William," he said, extending his hand with a warm smile. "Richard's cousin from Boston, and you're Hannah, the sister who apparently needs saving from eternal spinsterhood." Despite everything, I laughed. "That's me, the family charity case." "Well, not anymore," he said with a smile that was both reassuring and slightly mischievous. William draped his arm casually along the back of my chair and leaned in to speak to me like we'd known each other for years. Almost immediately, I noticed heads turning in our direction. Lydia, mid-conversation with the wedding planner, did a double take when she saw us. Her smile faltered for just a moment before she excused herself and started walking toward our table, her train trailing behind her like a weapon. "Hannah," she called out, her voice an octave higher than usual. "I didn't know you knew William." "Old friends," William said smoothly, his hand touching mine on the table. "We lost touch for a while, but you know how these things go." Lydia's eyes narrowed slightly, her perfect wedding composure cracking just enough to show her confusion. "Really? Hannah never mentioned you." "I try to keep my private life private," I said, finally finding my voice and some of my confidence. "You know how I am about work-life balance." The irony wasn't lost on me. Lydia had spent the entire evening broadcasting my lack of a love life, and now she was fishing for details about a relationship that didn't exist. "How wonderful," Lydia said, though her tone suggested it was anything but. "How long have you two been reconnecting?" "Long enough," William said with a smile that gave away nothing and everything. As Lydia walked away, clearly frustrated by the lack of information, William turned to me with a conspiratorial whisper. "She looks like she just bit into a lemon," he said. I couldn't help but smile. "She's not used to not knowing everything about my life or having me upstage her in any way." "Good," he said. "Let's keep her guessing." For the next hour, William played the part perfectly. He brought me drinks from the bar, laughed at my jokes, and touched my hand just enough to make our connection believable. But more than that, he actually listened when I talked. He asked about my work in marketing, my love of hiking, and my recent trip to Ireland. "You're not what I expected," he said during a quiet moment between songs. "What did you expect?" "Based on your sister's description, someone desperate and pathetic," he said bluntly. "Instead, I'm sitting with someone intelligent, funny, and honestly, I can't figure out why you're single." "Because I have standards," I said without thinking. He laughed, a genuine warm sound that made something inside my chest loosen. "Good for you." By this point, Lydia was openly staring at our table. I could see her whispering to Marian, who kept glancing over at us with obvious curiosity. Richard's family members who had pitied me earlier were now looking at William with interest and approval, clearly recognizing his social status and wondering how I'd managed to land someone so obviously successful. The revenge was already sweeter than I'd imagined. But William wasn't done. When the band started playing slow songs, he stood up and extended his hand with a confident smile. "Dance with me," he said. It wasn't a question. On the dance floor, with his hand on my waist and mine on his shoulder, I felt the eyes of every guest who had offered me unsolicited dating advice. But instead of feeling exposed, I felt protected. William moved with the kind of natural rhythm that suggested he'd grown up taking dancing lessons, and being in his arms felt surprisingly natural. "Your sister is watching," William murmured as we swayed to the music. "I know," I said. "She looks like she's going to explode." Mission accomplished. I looked up at him, this stranger who had given me back my dignity with a simple gesture. "Almost." That's when Lydia made her move. "Mind if I cut in?" she said, appearing beside us with Richard in tow. Her wedding smile was stretched tight across her face, and I could see the calculation behind her eyes. "Actually, yes," William said politely but firmly. "We're having a moment." Lydia's face went through several expressions before settling on forced brightness. "Of course, I just wanted to say how happy I am that Hannah finally found someone. We were all so worried about her." "Were you?" William asked, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. "Because from what I've observed tonight, it seems like you've been more interested in broadcasting her single status than supporting her." The directness of his statement left Lydia speechless for a moment. Richard shifted uncomfortably beside her, clearly sensing the tension but not understanding its source. We just want what's best for Hannah," Lydia stammered, her composure cracking. "Then maybe treat her with the respect she deserves instead of using her love life as entertainment for your wedding guests," William said calmly. I had never seen Lydia look so rattled. Her perfect wedding confidence was completely shattered, and for the first time all evening, she was the one who looked small. "I don't know what Hannah told you, but she didn't have to tell me anything," William interrupted. "I have eyes. I can see how you've been treating her all evening." Richard finally stepped in, clearly uncomfortable with the public nature of the confrontation. "Maybe we should let them get back to dancing." As they walked away, Lydia's composure was completely destroyed. I could see her frantically whispering to Marian, probably trying to figure out who William was and how I'd managed to land someone so obviously out of my league. "That felt really good," I admitted as we continued dancing. "We're not done yet," William said with a smile that made my heart skip. For the rest of the evening, William made sure I was never alone. When dinner was served, he requested that we be moved to a better table, something about his dietary restrictions requiring him to be closer to the kitchen. The staff, clearly knowing who Richard's family was, accommodated us immediately. Our new table was front and center, where everyone could see us laughing and talking like a real couple. Lydia's friends, who had ignored me earlier, suddenly wanted to chat and meet William. Richard's relatives, who had pitied me, now treated me with newfound respect and curiosity about my mysterious boyfriend. Mrs. Wellington, who had suggested church groups earlier, now wanted to know all about William's family background. When she learned he was a successful tech entrepreneur with an MBA from Harvard, her attitude toward me changed completely. "Hannah, you dark horse," she said with genuine admiration. "You never mentioned you were seeing someone so accomplished." But the final act of revenge came during the garter toss. When Richard prepared to throw the garter to all the single men, William stepped forward with the confidence of someone who belonged exactly where he was. "Wait," Lydia called out desperately. "William, you're not single." William looked at me, then back at Lydia with a mysterious smile. "Actually, I am. Hannah and I are taking things slow, getting reacquainted." The garter landed directly in his hands. Whether by luck or Richard's aim, I'll never know. But the symbolism wasn't lost on anyone, especially Lydia. According to tradition, William was supposed to place the garter on the leg of whoever caught the bouquet. But that young cousin Chloe had left early. "Looks like we need a volunteer," the DJ announced. William looked at me with a question in his eyes. I nodded. The crowd cheered as I sat in the chair, and William knelt before me, sliding the garter onto my leg with a gentleness that felt surprisingly intimate for an act of pretense. The moment felt charged with possibility, and I found myself wondering if the chemistry between us was entirely fake. Lydia's face was a mask of barely controlled fury as she watched her single, pathetic sister become the center of positive attention at her own wedding. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, William walked me to my car. The parking lot was quiet, away from the watchful eyes of wedding guests and my family. "Thank you," I said, finally alone with him. "I know tonight was just an act, but you saved me from the most humiliating experience of my life." "What makes you think it was just an act?" he asked, his expression serious. My heart stopped. Because you don't even know me." "I know enough," he said, stepping closer. "I know you're kind, even when people don't deserve it. I know you're strong enough to endure a night of humiliation without fighting back. I know you're beautiful inside and out. And I know your sister is an idiot for not seeing how lucky she is to have you as family." I felt tears threatening, but this time they weren't from humiliation. "William," I started, but he continued. "I know this started as a rescue mission," he said, "but somewhere between the first dance and now, it stopped being pretend for me." He handed me a business card with his personal number written on the back in elegant handwriting. "If you want to see me again, not for revenge, not to prove a point, just because you want to, call me." I took the card with shaking hands. "What if I want to call you tonight?" He smiled, that same confident smile that had first caught my attention. "Then I'll answer." 3 months later, William and I were officially dating. 6 months after that, we moved in together. And exactly 1 year after Lydia's wedding, he proposed to me in the same hotel where we'd first met. Lydia's reaction to our engagement announcement was everything I could have hoped for. The sister who had spent years making me feel inadequate for being single was now forced to watch me plan a wedding with a man who clearly adored me and who came from an even wealthier family than Richard. But the real revenge wasn't in proving Lydia wrong about my worthiness of love. It was in realizing that I didn't need her validation anymore. William's respect and genuine affection had shown me what I deserved, and I was never going to settle for less again. Our wedding was smaller than Lydia's, but infinitely more joyful. Instead of using the occasion to humiliate anyone, we celebrated with people who genuinely wanted us to be happy. Lydia gave a speech as my maid of honor, something she'd insisted on despite our complicated history. She talked about how happy she was to see me find love, how William was clearly perfect for me, how she'd always known I'd find someone special. The revisionist history was breathtaking. But I didn't care anymore. I had something more valuable than her approval. I had someone who saw my worth from the very beginning. Looking back, Lydia's wedding was the worst night of my life. Her cruelty showed me how I'd been allowing people to treat me, but it also led me to William. Without her humiliation, I never would have been vulnerable enough to accept help from a stranger. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most end up giving us exactly what we need to change our lives. Lydia wanted to make me feel small and pathetic. Instead, she created the circumstances for me to meet my future husband. The irony is perfect. In trying to prove I was unlovable, she delivered me directly to the love of my life.